Welcome to Leaders on the Edge, where bi-weekly I sit with extraordinary individuals from around the world who are top thinkers and doers. They're committed to developing and mastering their craft along with their mind and emotional resilience, so they can act boldly in situations where others often hang back and play it safe. And together, we are revolutionizing the role of leaders. I'm very excited to introduce my guest, Jennifer Schrader. Jen is the president, COO, and co-founder of Caliber and serves on the company's board of directors. She directly oversees all of Caliber's asset management activities, including the execution of each investment business plan and the management of the real estate services delivered by Caliber or third-party vendors. In addition, Jen oversees daily operations at Caliber, which includes managing talent development and resource management. Now, previously, Jennifer held the designated broker position with Caliber Realty Group, LLC. She still maintains her Arizona real estate license, currently as an associate broker. Prior to forming Caliber, Jennifer was a managing partner of First United Equities, LLC, which is a Michigan business where she obtained her real estate license in Michigan back in 2005 as a top performer with Keller Williams. She attended Lawrence Technological University in Michigan, where she studied architecture and interior architecture, and she serves on the Colangelo College of Business Advisory Board for Grand Canyon University here in Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome, Jen. I'm very excited to have you part of the podcast today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Can you give us a bit of a flyover? I mean, we know a little bit about your business background and that, but share with us a little bit more about you growing up and some of the experiences that you've had that have formed who you've become today.
Oh, that takes us back quite a few years. But so I grew up in Michigan, and very early on when I was in school for architecture and, like you said, interior architecture, my now husband was doing real estate investments, and I started dabbling a little bit and helping him with the interior design portion of it and the colors and where are we moving rooms around to and whatnot. And so I'd say early on, I've always had this kind of left brain, right brain. I don't want to say conflict, but challenge of which one's going to lead. And my business brain really loves the numbers and the execution and the returns, and my creative brain loves the design and what can we transform a property into. And so getting into real estate, even prior to Caliber, with the work that we were doing in Michigan, allowed me to satisfy the needs of both sides of my brain.
Excellent. Yeah, I know that feeling. I have a lot of male dominant type qualities whenever I'm in business, and then whenever I'm more at home in the relaxed area, I have a very soft, kind heart. So they sometimes blend well and sometimes not so much.
I understand that.
Yes. So I'm curious, knowing that you oversee the people management side of Caliber as well. What are you seeing as some of the biggest issues when it comes to leadership, whether it's within Caliber or just in businesses that you're in and around?
In general, I think this probably goes for both Caliber and both outside of Caliber. The world has changed so much in the past 2 years with the pandemic. I personally am a little bit sick of talking about it, but it's still daily news and it still impacts us daily. And so it's impossible to say that it's not still an impact. But, when it comes to leadership, one of the most challenging things I see is that leaders occasionally are promoted from a frontline individual contributor type position into a leadership position, and they have personal accountability, and they've really demonstrated the desire and the willingness to grow into a new position, but sometimes the training isn't there. And so It's absolutely necessary. Not everyone is a leader by nature. Some people figure it out, but I think, if there's training and mentorship available, that helps our leaders get there faster. But where I see them stumble a little bit is just with feedback with team members, and those tough conversations that we all have to have. We don't all enjoy having those, but it is a part of business and it is part of life. And so that's probably the number one area that I see leaders stumble in.
Yes, I hear you. I know I've just finished working with a global company. They've working with 41 of their females who are leaders, and the CEO happened to be a female, and she was part of it as well. And one of the things that they most enjoyed is whenever I talked about having those difficult conversations and just how to have them. And to know that as leaders, it used to be that top down hierarchical, I know it all. Look at my business card. Don't you see my title? I must be very special. Um, to where leaders nowadays, at least the way I coach and teach, is that you don't have to know it all. In fact, not knowing it all is almost a better position to be in, because you just have to know the questions to ask.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah.
We like to say that we hire people that are smarter than us at Caliber, because our business reaches so many different areas. We're in so many different asset classes that if we're realistic with ourselves, it's impossible to know everything. So why not bring in industry experts? And there's team members that we've brought on in the past year that I am so thrilled to say that I learn something from them every day.
Yes. And that's so exciting when it can be in that type of position that you can learn and grow at the same time you're mentoring and helping them. It's just a great partnership within
Yep.
the company with team members.
But
So,
it makes problems easier to solve when you have more minds in the room, you have experienced minds in the room, and it's not always just about your perspective. It's nice to have alternative perspectives and alternative solutions that are brought to the table.
yes. Is there a way, and this is just a curiosity, I'll state it this way. One of the problems I see that occurs often is people not listening. They kind of maybe almost listen, but they listen from their own bias or their own
Mhm.
perspective. What have you found, or how have you been able to, within your company or again, others that you work with, um, kind of move around and through that in order to make sure everybody is understanding what's being said in the room?
Mhm. So we use a tool that was taught to us by Christine Comerford. It's called
Mhm.
Echo Back. And so we've learned, because there are individuals that are amazing listeners. And sometimes I'm jealous of them because they're so present and they just pick up on every detail. And I find my mind wandering a little bit, even though I'm trying not to. But and then you've got individuals who are always one step ahead, and they're thinking of the next thing and they're thinking of the response, and so they're maybe perhaps not hearing the entire conversation. And so I like to close my meetings with my team members by saying, okay, let's summarize what we just heard here. Tell me what I just said to you. And it creates the opportunity before we both walk out of the room to clarify if something was missed.
Yes, yes, I love that. Yeah, and it is, like you said, and I love the word clarifying, is that then everybody knows and understands, because we can all hear, even, I've talked about before, I've got clients over in New Zealand and in other countries that, if words are said, doesn't mean that they have the same meaning one person to the next, and it could be just from, I came out of Chicago and somebody else may came out of California and use the same word has 2 different meanings, so it's great to have that clarity.
Yeah, that's something that I've experienced this year more so than ever as our team has grown. We have so many personalities that have come from so many different areas and now so many different countries. We're starting to have conference calls internationally, and so um, I've really become aware of the amount of slang that Americans use and
Yes.
how confusing that can make a conversation with um, individuals who don't speak English as a first language.
Right. Yeah, it's quite amazing, and if it's not clarified, can create a lot of problems down the road.
Mhm.
When we look at the world as it is today, and I've heard the quote before by several different people in several different ways, but the world is moving faster than it ever has before, and it will never move this slow again. And when I think about that statement, it's like, whoa, that is massively impactful. when you think about what's going on with Caliber and the world around you, those that you work with, how is the speed of change affecting you, both in a positive and in a negative way?
Well, I would say that quote is so true, specific to Caliber. We are absolutely moving faster than we ever had, and I don't see anything slowing down. And so it certainly creates opportunities and also creates challenges. The challenges are probably most related to communication and also team member capacity. And both of those to me are tied together, because it's us communicating on what are the opportunities that we have coming. And if we can figure out our manpower challenges, our team member capacity, then we can capitalize on those opportunities and not watch them go flying past us. And if we can't, then it's not going to be a good working environment. And so communicating that right now we have more opportunities than we've ever had, and ensuring that our team is aligned to what those are, to what the business goals are, and that they understand and acknowledge that they have the support from their peers and also from leadership within the organization.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'm curious, how do I want to state this? When you bring on, or you're looking to potentially hire someone, what are some of the qualities that you look for, and how do you ensure? I mean, there's people who will give you all the right answers, but then they don't behave the same way.
Correct.
How do you go through finding the right people to fit your culture as well as your work capacity?
For us, the cultural component of the interview is probably the number one component. We have had candidates that check all the boxes, but we come to the conclusion that they're just not a fit with us culturally, and we're not willing to disrupt the culture that we're so proud to have built. And we often identify that by scheduling multiple interviews. And so if someone's coming into my department, the real estate services department, and they're going to be a leader within that department, I'll schedule interviews with someone from accounting and finance, and someone from wealth development, and someone from marketing, and so on, because these are going to be their peers, and I want to see what their impression is, and will they all be able to collaborate together? Will this individual bring something new to the table that our team will be willing to accept and willing to embrace? And we also do something that's a little bit strange, that is not invented by us, but has certainly become a wonderful tool for us. And that's that we ask to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever, a meeting with the candidate's most important person. So it can be their spouse, it can be their boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister. We had a candidate years ago who brought his grandma in. And the goal in that is that this person is their support system. And so when they leave Caliber at the end of the day, and if they've had a rough day or they've had a great day and they want to go home and celebrate, who's the person that they're going to be sharing this news with or these emotions with? And is that person supportive of them taking a position here? Because if that individual thinks that this is absolutely wrong for them, then it's going to be an uphill battle when they're having a rough day. And vice versa, if that person thinks that this is the home that they need to find in terms of work, then they're going to be supportive when we're having our roughest of days. And it's worked out quite successfully for us. And sometimes it means that we don't move forward with the candidate, and sometimes that's their choice. We had an individual a couple years ago that we were about to sign an employment agreement with him. We were already talking office space and getting his tech set up, and we just happened to schedule the breakfast as at that point, really a check the box item. And both he and his wife were fantastic. And we had a wonderful conversation. And then he called me later that day and said, she sat me down and went, "What are you doing taking this position? This is totally not you. You will be miserable in this." And he goes, "She pointed out things that I had completely overlooked." And he goes, "I think that you'd be really unhappy if you hired me. And I think I'd be really unhappy if I joined. And I think it's better that we just don't go forward." And it was disappointing because we thought we were going down one path, but I was so appreciative and so impressed that they had that conversation, and he came back and told me that. And I think that's really how we build our culture here, is making sure that we're the right fit for the candidate and they're the right fit for us.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it's interesting. I was waiting for kind of a blow-up story where maybe you were at dinner or breakfast and there was bickering going on or something like that, but to hear that type of story is amazing. I would have a great deal of respect for that person and their spouse for coming to that conclusion
Mm-hmm.
before it was, more difficult to move away from for both you and them,
Yep.
so
And on the flip side of that, we've had some that to me was a positive outcome, even though it
Right.
wasn't the outcome we had intended.
Yeah.
But we've also had some really positive ones where the individual I mentioned who brought his grandma in, back in those days, we were working really late nights and weekends. And I think in many cases, and this was when we were in our more of our early phase startup organization, I think any parent or grandparent would probably look at their son or grandson and say, "What are you doing there that late at night?" Or "Why are you working so many hours?" And she was his biggest champion. She was sending food with him. She was coming to our events. And it was such a fun experience to see the support that he had at home. And he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think about that too, and think about what great values that I'm sure that she instilled in him,
Absolutely.
that he was still living out. So, what do you see, kind of switching gears just a little bit? When's a time? I mean, the name of the podcast is Leaders on the Edge. When is the time, whether in business or in your personal life, have you been what you would consider at the edge of just maybe not knowing what to do, or the decision making, or whatever it might be, pushed to the limit in some way? Just an example.
There's been so many of those times. I would probably tie them to when the business meets an inflection point. So that tends to be when we experience the most pain points, tends to be when we see a little bit more burnout with the team. And so I find that in those periods of time, we're managing both how do we get to the next step and how do we ensure that our team comes along with us, because there's sometimes not enough time in the day to manage to give the team the time that they need to understand why we're making the decisions that we're making, or how that's going to impact them. But it's so critical to convey those things, because they're the ones that are really, they're the foundation of what's getting us to the next steps. And trying to think of a specific example.
Well, a curiosity around that then, and I find it in the leadership teams that I work with, is that the being able to clearly communicate expectations to the team with a purpose, with them having the vision of understanding that I don't care what position, I don't care if you're sweeping floors, that you have a very important, part of this. How do you, maybe it's when have you tripped up, and then how do you in the future make sure that expectations are clear with your team members?
Yeah, so there's been times where, and this probably happened earlier on, and I think I'll be honest and say it occasionally still happens, and it's usually unintentional, but we think that or we make a decision that we're going to share a piece of the information with the team. And usually that decision comes from a place of good, where we're trying to protect them, and we choose not to share information because we don't have all of the information yet ourselves. And what we've learned is that actually creates fear, because information to me, and in my experience, creates power, and it helps and it creates safety. And when information is withheld, or there's a perception that it's withheld, it can create some fear with team members. And so we've transparency is one of our core values. And so we've transitioned into telling the team, we don't have all the information right now. This is our intention, and this is what we think is going to happen. Or in some cases, we have to say, legally, we're not at a point where we can share more information, the lawyers won't let us, or we're going to get in trouble if we do, but we want you to know as much as we can share with you. And then trying to have regular updates and regular communication after that. So it's not just a one and done. It's a, hey, last week or last month we said XYZ. Here's an update to that.
That's great. And how have you found that your team members have responded to information coming to them in more bits and pieces sometimes, whenever you can't share it all, but you do want to share what you know?
In general, and this is something that has evolved over time, but because we've tried to create this as a regular behavior of saying, if we can't share it all, we're at least going to share a piece of it. The team has been very receptive of it, and it's helped us grow the business, and it's helped us grow as leaders ourselves, because oftentimes with the amazing minds that we have in the room, they'll raise questions on the information that is available to be presented. And it might make us think about something that we hadn't thought of before. And, or, we've got fantastic leaders now that will hold executive leadership accountable and say, hey, you told us you were going to give us an update 3 weeks from now, or last month you said this, what's going on now? We need to know. And they're coming from such a place of good of, we need to know because we need to protect the organization, and we need to know how our department should be responding right now.
Right. No, that's, I love that. That kind of goes back to towards the beginning of our conversation where we talked about um, really sharing information back and forth, and not any one person being an expert, but having all the experts in the room in whatever their area of expertise is can be so invaluable to the whole. Um, so when you think about, I'm switching gears again.
Sure.
When you think about what comes up for you on a daily basis, your to-do list or whatever you might call it, what are some of the most urgent issues, the top 2 or 3 most urgent issues that you have on your desk right now when it comes to people, leadership, communications, internally or externally, anything along those lines?
Yeah, so that list is ever changing, but at this exact moment in time, we are heavily recruiting. We have a REIT that's coming on board later this year, so we have a number of executives that we're recruiting for that. We have support staff that we're recruiting, and so top of mind for me is how do we fill all these seats, and then also how do we make a fantastic onboarding experience for them, because we're a fairly complex business, and educating a new individual generally takes about 6 to 12 months. And so what are there efficiencies that we can create in that? And if not, how do we at least make sure that they have every tool possible available to them as of day one? And how do we make sure that we have regular communication and interaction so that as our team grows substantially, everyone's aware of what's going on and knows their roles and their responsibilities within?
I would think along with that there would be the used to be called, I don't know what it's called nowadays, if may not have changed, but like that open door policy to ask questions.
Yes.
And yet when oftentimes, especially when people are new, the thought of asking a question can be really scary because they don't want to look stupid. And the higher up the ladder they are, the more they don't want to look stupid because they think they're supposed to know it all. And yet in a new environment, how could they? And like you say, it can take, I used to say whenever I owned a corporation that the higher up the ladder you are, the longer it's going to take to do the onboarding. And like you mentioned, 6 to 12 months, it can depend. So how do you create that openness, or at least the openness to have those periodic meetings so questions can be asked and answered, and that comfort level and trust can be built?
Yep. We really put it on ourselves as executives and also on our leadership team to make the individuals comfortable, to reach out to them. So if it's someone within my vertical, I'll having regularly scheduled meetings to make sure that I'm doing the information downloads that need to occur. If it's someone that's outside of my vertical, I still, if they work from the office, still try to make a point to walk around and check in with everyone every so often, just to say hi, figure out what's new in life. And oftentimes those hallway conversations are where we figure out someone's missing a tool or someone doesn't have access to something that they need. No matter how good our checklists are for onboarding, there's always something that we didn't think about, or someone's responsibilities might have shifted early on, and we need to give them additional education or additional access to different tools.
Yeah, it's that spider web effect that when you touch one place, it touches every place else, it seems like. And talking about the to be able to walk around the office and you hear things that maybe just in a conversation or a lunchroom, where I used to sit at my desk, be on the phone, two people in front of me and somebody walking back and forth in front of my door in the hallway, and kind of hearing all those conversations at the same time. But now we have people who are virtual as well as people in the office. And the people who are virtual, part of the concerns that they have is they're not part of those conversations anymore. So being even heard and understood is more difficult. Is that something that do you still have people virtual within Caliber? And if so, how do you manage that?
So I guess the blessing and the curse of COVID is it forced us into figuring that out, or attempting to figure that out. I'm not going to say we've got it completely solved, but we do have team members now in at least 10 different states, and that's by design. And it's not because of COVID, it's because we're expanding our business footprint.
It's called growth, right?
It's because of growth, and it's been a good challenge to have. But what COVID did for us was teach us how to interact via Zoom or via Teams or in some sort of virtual environment, and get a little bit more comfortable in that. I am firmly of the opinion that Zoom will never replace a face-to-face interaction, especially when there's multiple parties involved. You just have a tendency to miss some of the social cues that you would normally see in person, some of the body language, and the conversations tend to be a bit more scripted. And so it's on the leaders to try a bit harder there. So if we've got a new team member who, I'll use my sales team as an example, because they're kind of spread all over the country. When they onboard, talent will schedule regular calls or regular virtual calls for us to make sure that they have touch points with different parties within the organization, not just within their vertical. And it doesn't replace sitting down and having a cup of coffee together, but it's absolutely better than doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely. Going back to the company I mentioned earlier that I've been working with for a year, the global company, and they're all over the world. And when we created cohorts where they were from different department, different levels, meeting together at least once a month in a cohort via Zoom, because they were all over the place, and it was more so in the middle of COVID. It was interesting to find out that's one of the things that they loved the most, because they were meeting with people they'd never known before and gaining perspectives that they never had before, because it was, COO maybe meeting with somebody who was a leader, and then a VP meeting with somebody who was, from a different team. And it kept it small, that it made for a great way to build trust and to learn some of the skills and to implement some of the skills. So I love the fact that you're understanding the need for that and implementing that within COVID. So I
we've
applaud you
also
for that.
set up sorry for that. We've also set up all of our meetings so that they're a hybrid, because we recognize that, and we also encourage our team members that if they have any sort of symptoms, I don't care if it's COVID, strep, flu, anything, just work from home. We're all set up to do that now, and don't bring any germs to the office.
Right.
And, there's still challenges with daycare and with school and stuff going on for the parents that have kids. And so we do set up our meetings to be hybrid, so that whether a person is working remote locally or they're working remote out of state, they can still participate in the meeting. And that goes all the way up to our quarterly all hands team meeting.
Yeah. That's great. I love it. I love it. You have such a very well-run company and well thought out company,
Thank
the way
you.
that you have, worked not only yourself, but within the leadership team to make sure that continues, which is what obviously has allowed you to grow the way that you have as well. So I
Thank you.
applaud you for all of that. Absolutely. So with that, if someone is looking to reach out to you or to Caliber, who would be the type of person? Describe who they would be. Um, that would be a good fit for your company as a investor or whatever position you might choose.
Yep. So whether it's an investor or it's someone looking to become a team member within Caliber, first and foremost, culture is important on both sides. And so we like to say, even with our investors, we work with good people that are going to do good for their communities. And same thing with our team members. When it comes to the team members, we're looking for individuals who are emotionally resilient, who are okay jumping into an organization that does something different every day. We set a business plan every year, and the market shifts a little bit every year, and our business plan shifts. And so we are entrepreneurial at heart. We care about our team members. We want our team members to care about each other. We're not trying to force friendships on them, but we want our team members to collaborate and enjoy working with each other. And so we also look for team members who want to bring a fresh perspective to the table and aren't afraid to voice that. And sometimes we have to say no to ideas because there's information that they might not have that hasn't been factored in, or it's not the right time. But we like to hear those ideas, and sometimes they'll get implemented down the road if we can't do it right now. And so we love creative folks that have a voice, that want to jump in and want to be problem solvers and want to be entrepreneurial.
Excellent. And what's the best way for them to get in contact with you or with Caliber?
Through our talent department, and if they go to our website, there is a button on the website that they can reach out directly to our talent department.
All right, fantastic. And we will have some of the links that we'll put in the show notes and that as well for everyone. So Jen, just thank you so much for joining me on Leaders on the Edge and for sharing your brilliance, for being so open with your answers and your experiences. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet. So this has been Leaders on the Edge. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe.